This is the public domain book on the cross, a romance of the Passion Play at Oberammergau by Wilhelmine von Hillern. Chapter 38. ONTHEYYTOTHE cross. It was Sunday. Again, the throngs surged around the Passion Theatre, more devout, more numerous than ever. Slowly, as if his feet could scarcely support him, a tall figure, strangely like one who no longer belongs to the number of the living, tottered through the crowd to the door of the dressing-room, while all reverently made way for him, yet everyone perceived that it must be the Christus. Whoever met his eye shuddered, as if the incarnation of woe had passed, as if he had seen the face of the god of sorrow. 8 o'clock had struck, the canon had announced the commencement of the play, the waiting throng pressed in, crowding each other, and the doors were closed. Outside of the theatre it was silent and empty. The carriages had driven away. The people who could get no tickets had dispersed. Only the vendors of photographs and eatables still sat in their booths, listening idly and sleepily to the notes of the music, which came in subdued tones through the board partition. Suddenly, the ground trembled slightly under the wheels of a carriage driven at furious speed. A pair of horses covered with foam appeared in the distance. In a few seconds a dusty victoria stopped before the Passion Theatre. "Staced," said one of the box tenders, appearing at the top of the stairs and hurrying down to prevent farther disturbance. "Can I get a ticket?" asked the lady in the carriage. "I am very sorry, but unfortunately every seat is filled." "Oh, heaven! I lost an hour. One of the horses met with an accident. I have driven all night. I beg you, I must get in." The box tender shrugged his shoulders. "Unfortunately, it is impossible," he said with an offensively lofty manner. "I am not accustomed to find anything which I desire impossible, so far as it depends upon human beings to fulfill it," she answered haughtily. "I will pay any price, no matter whether it is 1,000 marks more or less, if you will get me even the poorest seat within the walls." "It is not a question of price," was the smiling answer. "If we had the smallest space, we could have disposed of it 100 times over today. Then take me on the stage." "Oh, it is no use to speak of that. No matter who might come, no one is allowed there." "Then announce me to the burgomaster. I will give you my card. I am very sorry, but I have no admittance to the stage during the performance. In the long intermission at 12 o'clock you might be announced, but not before." The Countess's heart throbbed faster and faster. She could hear the notes of the music. She fancied she could distinguish the different voices, yet she was not permitted to enter. Now came the shouts of Hosanna. Yes, distinctly. That was the entry into Jerusalem. Those were the exulting throngs who attended him. If she could only look through a chink. Now it was still. Then a voice. Oh, she would recognize those tones among thousands. A draught of air bore them to her through the cracks in the walls. Yes, that was he. A tremor ran through every limb. He was speaking. The world hung on his lips. Joy was in every eye. Comfort in every heart. Within was salvation, and she must stand without and could not go to her own husband. But he was not her husband, that had been her own wish. Now it was granted. The foolish virgin outside the door burst into tears like a child. The man who had just refused her request so coldly pitied her. "If I only knew how to help you, I would do so gladly," he said thoughtfully. "I'll tell you. If it is so important, come during the intermission, but on foot, without attracting attention to the rear entrance of the stage. Then I'll try to smuggle you in, even if it is only into the passage for the chorus." "Oh, sir, I thank you," said the Countess with a look which a lost soul might give to the angel who opened the gates of paradise. "I will be there punctually at 12. Don't you think I might speak to Herr Freya during the intermission?" she asked timidly. A smile of sorrowful pity flitted over the man's face. "Oh, he speaks to no one. We are rejoiced every time that he is able to get through the performance. Alas." "Is he so ill?" "Yes," replied the man in a tone very low, as if he feared the very air might hear, "very ill." Then he went up the stairs again to his post. "Where shall we drive now?" asked Martin. The Countess was obliged to reflect a short time ere she answered. "I think it would be best to try to find a lodging somewhere," she said hesitatingly, still listening to the sounds from the theatre, to learn what was passing within, what scene they were playing, who was speaking. "Drive slowly, Martin," she begged. She was in no hurry now. "Stop!" she called as Martin started. She had just heard a voice that sounded like his. Martin made the horses move very slowly as he drove on. Thus, at the most tardy pace, they passed around the Passion Theatre and then in the opposite direction toward the village. At the exit from the square, an official notification was posted. No Monday performances will be given hereafter. Herr Freya's health will not permit him to play 2 days in succession. The Countess pressed her clasped hands upon her quivering heart. Bear it. It must be borne. It is your own fault, now suffer. A stranger in a private carriage, who was looking for lodgings on the day everybody else was going away, was a welcome apparition in the village. At every house to which she drove, the occupants who remained in it hastened to welcome her, but none of the rooms pleased her. For a moment she thought of going to the drawing master's, but there also the quarters were too low and narrow. And she could not deceive herself. The tie between her and Ludwig Gross was sundered. He could not forgive what she had done to his friend. She avoided him as though he were her judge. And besides, she wanted quiet rooms where an invalid could rest, and these were not easy to find now. At last she discovered them. A plain house, surrounded by foliage, in a secluded street, which had only 2 rooms on the ground floor, where they could live wholly unseen and unheard. They were plain apartments, but the ceilings were not too low, and the sunbeams shone through the chinks of the green shutters with a warm yet subdued light. A peaceful, cheerful shelter. She hired them for an indefinite time, and quickly made an agreement with the elderly woman to whom they belonged. There was a little kitchen also, and the woman was willing to do the cooking. So for the next few days at least she had a comfortable home, and now would to heaven that she might not occupy it in despair. "Well, now your Highness is nicely settled," said old Martin, when the housewife opened the shutters, and he glanced down from his box into the pretty room. "I should like such a little home myself." The Countess ordered the luggage to be brought in. "Where shall I put up, your Highness?" "Go to the old post-house, Martin. Shan't I take you to the Passion Theatre?" "No, you heard that I must walk there." Martin shook his head. This seemed to him almost too humiliating to his proud mistress, but he did not venture to make any comment, and drove off, pondering over his own thoughts. It was 9 o'clock, 3 hours before the long intermission. What might not happen during that time? Could she wait? Would not anxiety kill her or rob her of her senses? But nothing could be done. She must wait. She could not hasten the hour on which depended life and death, deliverance or doom. The nocturnal ride, the fright occasioned by the fiery horses which had upset the carriage and forced her to walk to the next relay and thus lose a precious hour, her agitation beside her father's sick bed, now asserted themselves, and she lay down on one of the neat white beds in the room and used the time to rest and recover her strength a little. A little. She was only a feeble woman, and the valiant spirit which had so long created its own law and battled for it was too powerful for a woman's feeble frame. It was fortunate that she was compelled to take this rest, or she would have succumbed. A restless slumber took possession of her at intervals, from which she started to look at the clock and mournfully convince herself that not more than 5 minutes had elapsed. The old woman brought in a cup of coffee, which she pressed upon her. No food had passed her lips since the day before, and the warm drink somewhat revived her. But the rapid throbbing of her heart soon prevented her remaining in bed, and rising, she busied herself a little in unpacking. The first time in her life that she had ever performed such work. She remembered how she had wept 10 years ago in the Gross house, because she was left without a maid. At last, the time of torture was over. The clock struck 11:45. She put on her hat, though it was still far too early, but she could not bear to stay in the room. She wished at least to be near the theatre. When she reached the door, her breath failed, and she was obliged to stop and calm herself. Then, summoning all her courage, she raised her eyes to heaven, and murmuring, "In God's name," went to meet the terrible uncertainty. Now she repented that she did not use the carriage. She could scarcely move. It seemed at every step as if she were sinking into the earth instead of advancing, as if she should never reach the goal, as if the road stretched longer and longer before her. A burning noonday sun blazed down upon her head. The perspiration stood on her forehead, and her lips were parched. Her feet were swollen and lame from the night watch at her father's bedside and the exhausting journey which had followed it. At last, with much effort, she reached the theatre. The first part of the performance was just over. Throngs of people were pouring out of the sultry atmosphere into the open air and hurrying to get their dinners. But every face wore a look of the deepest emotion and sorrow. On every lip was the one word, Freya. The Countess stole through the throngs like a criminal, holding her sunshade lower and drawing her veil more closely over her face. Only let her escape recognition now. avoid meeting anyone who would speak to her. This was her mortal dread. If she could only render herself invisible. With the utmost exertion she forced her way through, and now she could at least take breath after the stifling pressure. But everything around her was now so bare, she was so exposed as she crossed the broad open space. She felt as though she were the target for every curious eye among the spectators. She clenched her teeth in her embarrassment. It was fairly running the gauntlet. She could no longer think or feel anything except a desire that the earth would swallow her. At last, tottering, trembling, almost overcome by heat and haste, she reached the welcome shade on the northern side of the theatre and stopped. This was her goal. Leaning against the wall, she half concealed herself behind a post at the door. Women carrying baskets passed her. They were admitted because they were bringing their husbands' food. They glanced curiously at the dusty stranger leaning wearily behind the door. Who can she be? Somebody who isn't quite right, that's certain. The tortured woman read this query on every face. Here, too, she was in a pillory. Oh, power and rank! Before the wooden fence surrounding the great drama of Christian thought, you crumble and are nothing save what you are in and through love. The Countess Wildenau waited humbly at the door of the Passion Theatre until the compassionate box-opener should come to admit her. How long she stood there she did not know. Burning drops fell from brow and eyes, but she endured it like a suffering penitent. This was her way to the cross. The clock struck 1. The flood was surging back from the village. "Oh God, save me!" she prayed, trembling. Her agony had reached its height. But now the man could not come until everyone was seated. And Freya, what was he doing in his dressing room, which she knew he never left during an intermission? Was he resting or eating some strengthening food? Probably one of the women who passed had taken him something. She envied the poor women with their baskets because they were permitted to do their duty. Then, she scarcely dared to believe it, the box-opener came running out. "I've kept you waiting a long time, haven't I? But everyone has had his hands full. Now come quick." He slipped stealthily forward, beckoning to her to follow, and led her through byways and dark corners, often concealing her with his own person when anyone approached. The signal for raising the curtain was given just as they reached a hidden corner in the proscenium, where the chorus entered. "Sit down there on the stool," he whispered. "You can't see much, it is true, but you can hear everything. It's not a good place, yet it's better than nothing." "Certainly," replied the Countess, breathlessly. She could not see, coming from the bright sunshine into the dusky space. She sank half fainting on the stool to which he pointed. She was on the stage of the Passion, near Freya. True, she said to herself, that he must not be permitted to suspect it, lest he should be unable to finish his task, but at least she was near him. Her fate was approaching its fulfillment. "You have done me a priceless service, I thank you." She pressed a banknote into the man's hand. No, I did it gladly," he answered, noiselessly retreating. The exhausted woman closed her eyes and rested a few minutes from the torture she had endured. The chorus entered and opened the drama again. A tableau followed. Then the high priest and Annas appeared in the balcony of his house. Judas soon entered, but everything passed before her like a dream. She could not see what was occurring on her side of the stage. Thus lost in thought, she leaned back in her dark corner, forgetting the present in what the next hours would bring, failing to hear even the hosannas. But now a voice startled her from her torpor. "I spake openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple. Merciful heaven, it was he." She could not see him. The side scenes concealed him. But what a feeling! His voice, which had so often spoken to her words of love, entreaty, warning, lastly of wrath and despair, without heed from her, without waking an echo in her cold heart, now pealed like an angel's message into the dark corner where she sat concealed like a lost soul that had forfeited the sight of the Redeemer. She listened eagerly to the marvellous tones of the words no longer addressed to her while the speaker's face remained concealed, the face on which, in mortal dread, she might have read the runes engraved by pain and learned whether they meant life or death. And yet, at least she was near him, so near that she thought he must hear the throbbing of her own heart. Bear patiently. Do not disturb him in his sacred fulfillment of duty. It will soon be over. The play seemed endlessly long to her impatient heart. Christ was dragged from trial to trial. The mockery, the scourging, the condemnation. The tortured woman shared them all with him, as she had done the first time. But today it was like a blind person. She had not yet succeeded in seeing him. He always stood so that she could never catch a glimpse of his face. Would he hold out? She fancied that his voice grew weaker hour by hour, and she dared not tend him, dared not offer him any strengthening drink, dared not wipe the moisture from his brow. She heard the audience weeping and sobbing. The scene of bearing the cross was at hand. The sky had darkened, and heavy sultry clouds hung low, forming natural soffits to the open front stage, as if heaven desired to conceal it from the curious gods, that they might not see what was passing to. Day, Mary and John. The women of Jerusalem and Simon of Cyrene assembled, waiting in anxious suspense for the coming of the Christ. Anastasia was again personating Mary. The Countess instantly recognized her pure, clear tones, and the meeting in the fields 10 years before came back to her mind, not without a throb of jealous emotion. Now a movement among the audience announced the approach of the procession. Of the cross. This time the actors came from the opposite direction and upon the front stage. Every vein in her body was throbbing, her brain whirled, she struggled to maintain her composure. At last she was to see him for the first time. "It is he, O God, it is my son!" cried Mary. Christ stepped upon the stage, laden with the cross. It was acting no longer, it was reality. His feet could scarcely support him under the burden, panting for breath. He dragged himself to the proscenium. The Countess uttered a low cry of alarm. She fancied that she was looking into the eyes of a dying man, so ghastly was his appearance. But he had heard the exclamation and, raising his head, looked at her. His emaciated face quivered. He tottered, fell. He was obliged to fall. It was in his part. The Countess shuddered. It was too natural. "He can go no farther," said the executioner. "Here, strengthen yourself." The captain handed him the flask, but he did not take it. "You won't drink? Then drive him forward." The executioner shook him roughly, but Freya did not stir. He ought not to move yet. Simon of Cyrene took the cross on his shoulders, and now the Christ should have risen, but he still lay prostrate. The cue was given, repeated. A pause followed. A few of the calmer ones began to improvise. The man who was personating, the executioner, stooped and shook him. Another tried to raise him. In vain. An uneasy movement ran through the audience. The actors gathered around and gazed at him. "He is dead! It has come upon us!" ran in accents of horror from lip to lip. An indescribable confusion followed. The audience rose tumultuously from the seats. Caiaphas, the burgomaster, ordered in a low tone, "To the central stage, everyone, quick, and then drop the curtain." But no one heard him. He bent over the senseless figure. "It is only an attack of faintness," he called to the audience, but the excitement could no longer be allayed. All were pressing across the orchestra to the stage. The Countess could bear it no longer. Rank and station, the thousands of curious eyes to which she would expose herself were all forgotten. There is a cosmopolitanism which unites mortals in a common brotherhood more closely than anything else, a mutual sorrow. "Freya! Freya!" she shrieked in tones that thrilled every nerve of the bystanders. "Do not die! Oh, do not die!" Rushing upon the stage, she threw herself on her knees beside the unconscious form. "Ladies and gentlemen, I must beg you to clear the stage," shouted Caiaphas to the throng, and turning to the Countess, whom he recognized, added, "Countess Wildenau, I can permit no stranger to enter. I must beg you to withdraw." She drew herself up to her full height, composed and lofty. An indescribable dignity pervaded her whole bearing. "I have a right to be here. I am his wife." Chapter 39. Stations OF Sorrow. I am his wife. Heaven and earth have heard it. She had conquered. The tremendous deed, fear of which had led her to the verge of crime, love had now done in a single moment without conflict or delay. There was joy in heaven and on earth over the penitent sinner. And all the viewless powers which watch the way to the cross, wherever any human being treads it, all the angels, the guardian spirits of the now interrupted clay, hastened to aid the new Magdalene, that she might climb the Mount of Calvary to the hill of Golgotha. And as if the heavenly hosts were rushing down to accompany this bearer of the cross, a gust of wind suddenly swept through the open space across the stage and over the audience, and the palms rustled in the breeze, the palaces of Jerusalem tottered, and the painted curtains swayed in the air. This one gust of wind had rent the threatening clouds, so that the sun sent down a slanting, brilliant ray, like the dawn of light when chaos began to disappear. A light rain which in the golden streaks glittered like dusty pearls fell, settling the dust and dispelling the sultriness of the parched earth. Silence had fallen upon the people on the stage and in the audience, and as a scorched flower thirstily expands to the cooling dew, the sick man's lips parted and eagerly inhaled the damp, refreshing air. "Oh, he lives!" said the Countess in a tone as sweet as any mother ever murmured at the bedside of a child whom she had believed dead, any bride on the breast of her wounded lover. "He lives! Oh, he lives!" all the spectators repeated. Meanwhile, the physician had come and examined the sufferer, who had been placed on a couch formed of cloaks and shawls. It is a severe attack of heart disease. The patient must be taken to better lodgings than he has hitherto occupied. This condition needs the most careful nursing to avoid the danger. I have repeatedly called attention to it, but always in vain. "It will be different now, doctor," said the Countess. "I have already secured rooms and begged to be allowed to move him there." "The Countess!" she suddenly heard a voice exclaim behind her, and when she glanced around, Ludwig Gross stood before her in speechless amazement. "Can it be? I have just arrived by the train from Munich, but I did not see. I suppose so. I drove here last night. But do not call me Countess any longer, Herr Gross. My name is Magdalena Freya." The drawing-master made no reply, but knelt beside the sick man, who was beginning to breathe faintly and bent over him a long time. "If only it is not too late," he muttered bitterly, still unappeased. The burgomaster approached the Countess and held out his hand, gazing into her eyes with deep emotion. "Such an act can never be too late. Even if it can no longer benefit the individual, it is still a contribution to the moral treasure of the world," he said consolingly. "I thank you. You are very kind," she answered, tears springing to her eyes. A litter had now been obtained, and the physician ordered the sufferer to be lifted gently and laid upon it. "We will first take him to the dressing-room and give him some food before carrying him home." The Countess had mentioned the street. It is some little distance to the house. The command was obeyed, and the litter was carried to the dressing-room. The friends followed with the Countess. On the way, a woman timidly joined her and gazed at her with large, sparkling eyes. "I don't know whether you remember me. I only wanted to tell you how glad I am that you are here." "Oh, how well he has deserved it, Mary," said the Countess, shamed and overpowered by the charm of this most unselfish soul, clasping both her hands. "Mary, Mother of God!" and her head sank on her companion's virgin breast. Anastasia passed her arm affectionately around her and supported her as they moved on. "Yes, we two must hold together. Like Mary and Magdalene, we will aid each other. It is very hard, but our two saints had no easier lot. And if I can help in any way—" They had reached the dressing-room. The group paused. The Countess pressed Anastasia's hand. "Yes, we will hold together, Mary." Then she hastened to her husband's side. But the doctor motioned to her to keep at a distance that the sudden sight of her might not harm the sick man when he recovered his consciousness. He felt his pulse, scarcely 50 beats. "I must give an injection of ether." He drew the little apparatus from his pocket, thrust the needle into Freya's arm, and injected a little of the stimulating fluid. The bystanders awaited the result in breathless suspense. "Bring wine, eggs, bouillon, anything you can get, only something strong which will increase the action of the heart." The drawing-master hurried off. The pastor, who had just heard of the occurrence, now entered. "Is the sacrament to be administered?" he asked. "No, there is no fear of so speedy an end," the physician answered. "Rest is the most imperative necessity." The burgomaster led the pastor to the Countess. "This is Herr Freya's wife, who has just publicly acknowledged her marriage," he said in a low tone. "Countess Wildenau. These are certainly remarkable events." "Well, I can only hope that God will reward such love," the priest replied with delicate tact. "You have made a great sacrifice, Countess." "Oh, if you knew." She paused. "Hark! He is recovering his consciousness." She clasped her hands and bent forward to listen. "May God help us now." "How do you feel, Herr Freya?" asked the doctor. "Tolerably well, doctor. Are you weeping, Mary? Did I frighten you?" He beckoned to her, and she hastened to his side. The Count's eyes grew dim as he whispered something to Anastasia. This was the torture of the damned Mary might be near him. His first glance, his first words were hers, while she, his wife, stood banished at a distance. And she had made him suffer this torture for years, without compassion. "O God, thou art just, and thy scales weigh exactly." But the all-wise Father does not only punish, he also shows mercy. "Where is she?" Anastasia repeated his words in a clear, joyous tone. "You thought you saw her in the passage through which the chorus passed? "Oh, you must have been mistaken," she added at a sign from the physician. "Yes, you are right. How could she be there? It is impossible." The Countess tried to move forward, but the physician authoritatively stopped her. The burgomaster gently approached him. "My dear Freya, what could I do for you? Have you no wish?" "Nothing except to die. I would willingly have played until the end of the performances for your sake, but I am content." The drawing master brought in the food which the physician had ordered. The latter went to him with a glass of champagne. "Drink this, Herr Freya. It will do you good, and then you can eat something." But the sick man did not touch the glass. "Oh no, I will take nothing more." "Why not? You must eat something, or you will not recover." "I cannot, certainly you can." "Very well, I will not." "Freya," cried Ludwig beseechingly, "don't be obstinate. What fancy have you taken into your head?" And he again vainly offered the strengthening draught. "Shall I live if I drink it?" asked Freya. "Certainly." "Then I will not take it." "Not even if I entreat you, Freya?" asked the burgomaster. "Oh, do not torture me, do not force me to live longer," pleaded Freya with a heart-rending expression. "If you knew what I have suffered, you would not grudge the release which God now sends me. I have vowed to be faithful to my duty until death. Did I not, Sexton, on Dasenberger's grave? I have held out as long as I could. Now let me die quietly." "Oh, my friend," said the sexton, "must we lose you?" The strong man was weeping like a child. "Live for us, if not for yourself." "No, Sexton, if God calls me, I must not linger, for I have still another duty. I have lived for you, I must die for another." "But, Herr Freya," said the pastor kindly, "suppose that this other person should not be benefited by your death." Freya looked as if he did not understand him. "If this other of whom you speak had come to nurse and stay with you," the pastor continued. Freya raised himself a little. A blissful presentiment flitted over his face like the coming of dawn. "Suppose that your eyes did not deceive you," the burgomaster now added gently. "Am I not dreaming? Was it true? Was it possible?" "If you don't excite yourself and will keep perfectly calm," said the physician, "I will bring your wife, my wife. You are driving me mad. I have no wife." "No wife? You have no wife? You have no wife?" cried a voice as if from the depths of an ocean of love and anguish, as the unhappy woman who had forced her own husband to disown her sank sobbing before him. A cry, "My dove," and his head drooped on her breast. A breathless silence pervaded the room. Everyone's hands were clasped in silent prayer. No one knew whether the moment was fraught with life or death, but it was to bring life. For the Christus must not die on the way to the cross, and Mary Magdalene must still climb to its foot, the last, steepest portion, that her destiny might be fulfilled. The husband and wife were whispering together. The others modestly drew back. "And you wish to die? It was not enough that you vanished from my life like a shadow. You wish to go out of the world also," she sobbed. "Do you believe that I could then find rest on earth or in heaven? Oh, dear one, I am happy. Let me die. I have prayed for it always. God has mercifully granted it. When I am out of the world you will be a widow, and can marry another without committing a sin." "Oh, heaven, Joseph, I will marry no other. I love no one save you." He smiled mournfully. "You love me now because I am dying. Had I lived you would have gone onward in the path of sin, and been lost. No, my child, I must die, that you may learn by my little sacrifice to understand the great atonement of Christ. I must sacrifice myself for you, as Christ sacrificed himself for the sins of mankind." "Oh, that is not needed. God has taken the will for the deed, and given it the same power. Your lofty, patient suffering has conquered me. You need not die. I mistook you for what you were not, a god, and did not perceive what you were. Now I do know it. Forgive my folly. To save me you need be nothing save a man, a genuine, noble, lovable man as you are. Then no god will be required." "Do you believe that?" Freya looked at her with a divine expression. "Do you believe you could be content with a mortal man?" "No, my child, the same disappointment would follow as before. The flame that blazes within your soul does not feed upon earthly matter. You need a God, and your great heart will not rest until you have found him. Therefore be comforted. The false Christ will vanish, and the true one will rise from his grave." "No, do not wrong me so, do not die. Let me not atone for my sin to the dead, but to the living. Oh, do not be cruel, do not punish me so harshly. You are silent, you are growing paler still. Ah, you will go and leave me standing alone halfway along the road, unable either to move forward or back. My Joseph, I have broken every bond with the Duke, have cast aside everything which separated us, have become a poor, helpless woman, and you will abandon me. Now, when I have given you my whole existence, when I am nothing but your wife. Freya raised himself. Give me the wine, now I long to live. A universal movement of delight ran through the group of friends, and the Countess held the foaming cup to his lips and supported his head with one hand that he might drink. Then she gave him a little food and arranged him in a more comfortable position. Come, let your wife nurse you, she said so tenderly that all the listeners were touched. Then she laid a cooling bandage on his brow. Ah, that does me good, he said, but his eyes rested steadily on hers, and he seemed to be alluding to something other than the external remedies, though these quickly produced their effect. His breathing gradually became more regular, his eyes closed, weakness asserted itself, but he slept soundly and quietly. The physician withdrew to soothe the strangers waiting outside by an encouraging report. Only Freya's friends and the pastor remained. The Countess rose from beside the sleeper's couch and stretched her arms towards heaven. Lend him to me, merciful God. I have forfeited my right to him. I say it in the presence of all these witnesses. But be merciful and lend him to me long enough for me to atone for my sin, that I may not be doomed to the torture of eternal remorse. She spoke in a low tone in order not to rouse the slumberer, but in a voice which could be distinctly heard by the others. Her hands were clasped convulsively, her eyes were raised as if to pierce to the presence of God. Her noble bearing expressed the energy of despair, striving with eternity for the space of a moment. O God, leave him with me! Hold back thy avenging hand, grant a respite. Omnipotent One, first witness my atonement. First try whether I may not be saved by mercy. Friends, pray with me. She clasped their hands, as if imploring help. Her strength was failing. Trembling, she sank beside Ludwig and pressed her forehead, bedewed with cold perspiration, against his arm. All bared their heads and prayed in a low tone. Madeleine's breast heaved in mortal anguish, and, almost stifled by her suppressed tears, she could only falter, half unconsciously, "Have pity upon us." Meanwhile, the doctor had made all necessary preparations and was waiting for the patient to wake in order to remove him to his home. The murmured prayers had ceased, and the friends gathered silently around the bed. The Countess again knelt beside the invalid, clasping him in a gentle embrace. Her tears were now checked lest she might disturb him, but they continued to flow in her heart. Her lips rested on his hand in a long kiss. The hand which had once supported and guided her now lay pale and thin on the coverlet, as if it would never more have strength to clasp hers with a loving pressure. "Are you weeping, dear wife?" That voice. She raised her head, but could not meet the eyes which gazed at her so tenderly. Dared she, the condemned one, enjoy the bliss of that look? No, never. And, without raising an eyelash, she hid her guilty brow with unutterable tenderness upon his breast. The feeble hand was raised and gently stroked her cheek, touching it as lightly as a withered leaf. "Do not weep," he whispered with the voice of a consoling angel. "Be calm. God is good. He will be merciful to us also. O trumpet of the judgment day, what is thy blare to the sinner compared to the gentle words of pardoning love from a wounded breast?" The Countess was overpowered by the mild, merciful judgment. A living lane had formed in front of the theatre. He was to be carried home, rumour said, and the people were waiting in a dense throng to see him. At last a movement ran through the ranks. "He is coming. Is he alive?" "Yes, they say he is." Slowly and carefully, the men bore out the litter on which he lay, pale and motionless as a dead man. The pastor walked on one side, and on the other, steadying his head, the Countess. She could scarcely walk, but she did not avert her eyes from him. As on the way to Golgotha, low sobs greeted the little procession. "Oh dear, poor fellow, just one look, one touch of the hand," the people pleaded. "Wait just one moment." As if by a single impulse the bearers halted, and the people pressed forward with throbbing hearts, modestly, reverently touching the hanging coverlet, and gazing at him with tearful eyes full of unutterable grief. The Countess, with a beautiful impulse of humanity, gently drew his hand from under the wraps and held it to the sorrowing spectators who had waited so long that they might kiss it, and everyone who could get near enough eagerly drank from the proffered beaker of love. Grateful eyes followed the Countess, and she felt their benediction with the joy of the saints when God lends their acts the power of divine grace. She was now a beggar. Yet never before had she been rich enough to bestow such alms. "Yes, kiss his hand, he deserves it," she whispered, and her eyes beamed with a love which was not of this earth, yet which blended her, the world, and everything it contained into a single, vast, fraternal community. Freya smiled at her, and now she bore the sweet, tender gaze, for she felt as if a time might come when she would again deserve it. At last they reached the pretty quiet house where she had that morning hired lodgings for him and herself. Morning love had followed him to the spot. The throng had increased so that the bearers could scarcely get in with the litter. "Farewell, poor sufferer. May God be with you," fell from every lip as he was borne in and the door closed behind him. The spacious room on the lower floor received the invalid. The landlady had hurriedly prepared the bed and he was laid in it. As the soft pillows arranged by careful hands yielded to the weary form, and his wife bent over him, supporting his head on her arm. He glanced joyously around the circle, unable to think or say anything except, "Oh, how comfortable I am." They turned away to hide their emotion. The Countess laid her head on the pillow beside him, no longer restraining her tears and murmuring in his ear, "Angel, you modest, forgiving, loving angel." She was silent, forcing herself to repress the language of her heart, for the cry of her remorse might disturb the feeble invalid. Yet he felt what moved her. He had always read her inmost soul so long as she loved him. Not until strangers came between them did he fail to comprehend her. Now he felt what she must suffer in her remorse and pitied her torture. He thought only of how he might console her. But this moved her more than all the reproaches he had a right to make, for the greater, the more noble his nature revealed itself to be, the greater her guilt became. The friends were to take turns in helping the Countess watch the invalid through the night, and now left him. The doctor said that there was no immediate danger and went away to get more medicines. When all had gone, she knelt beside the bed and said softly, "Now I am yours. I do not ask whether you will forgive me, for I see that you have already done so. I ask only whether you will again take the condemned, sin-laden woman to your heart. In my deed today, I chose the fate of poverty. I can offer you nothing more in worldly wealth. I can only provide you with a simple home, work for you, nurse you, and atone by lifelong love and fidelity for the wrong I have done you. Will you be content with that?" Freya drew her toward him with all his feeble strength. Tears of unutterable happiness were trickling down his cheeks. "I thank thee, God, thou hast given her to me today for the first time. Come, my wife. Place your fate trustfully in God's hands and your dear heart in mine, and all will be well. He will be merciful and suffer me to live a few years that I may work for you, not you for me. Oh, blissful words, work for my wife. They make me well again. And now, while we are alone, the first sacred kiss of conjugal love." He tried to raise his head, but she pressed it with gentle violence back upon the pillow. "No, you must keep perfectly quiet. Imagine that you are a marble statue, and let me kiss you. Remain cold, and let all the fervour of a repentant, loving heart pour itself upon you." She stooped and touched his pale mouth gently, almost timidly, with her quivering lips. "Oh, that was again an angel's kiss," he murmured, clasping his hands over the head bowed in penitent humility. Chapter 40. Near Th. Goal. From that hour Magdalena Freya never left her husband's bedside. Though friends came in turn to share the night watches, she remained with them. After a few days the doctor said that unless an attack of weakness supervened, the danger was over for the present, though he did not conceal from her that the disease was incurable. She clasped her hands and answered, "I will consider every day that I am permitted to keep him a boon, and submissively accept what God sends." After that time she always showed her husband a smiling face, and he, perfectly aware of his condition, practiced the same loving deception toward her. Thus they continued to live in the salutary school of the most rigid self-control. She, bearing with dignity a sad fate for which she herself was to blame, he in the happiness of that passive heroism of Christianity which goes with a smile to meet death for others. An atmosphere of cheerfulness surrounded this sick-bed, which can be understood only by one who has watched for months beside the couch of incurable disease, and felt the gratitude with which every delay of the catastrophe, every apparent improvement is greeted. The quiet delight afforded by every little relief given the beloved sufferer, every smile which shows us he feels somewhat easier. This cup of anguish the penitent woman now drained to the dregs. True, a friendly genius always stood beside it to comfort her. The hope that, though not fully recovered, he might still be spared to her. How many thousands who have heart disease, with care and nursing, live to grow old? This thought sustained her. Yet the ceaseless anxiety and sleepless nights exhausted her strength. Her cheeks grew hollow, dark circles surrounded her eyes, but she did not heed it. "I still please my husband," she said, smiling, in reply to all entreaties to spare herself on account of her altered appearance. "My dove," Freya said one evening when Ludwig came for the night, "watch. Now I must show a husband's authority and command you to take some rest. You cannot go on in this way." "Oh, never mind me. If I should die for you, what would it matter? Would it not be a just atonement?" "No, that would be no atonement," he said tenderly, pushing back the light fringe of curls that shaded her brow, as if he wished to read her thoughts on it. "My child, you must live for me. That is your atonement. Do you think you would do anything good if you expiated your fault by death and said, 'There you have my life for yours, now we are quits, you have no farther claim upon me'? Would that be love, my dove?" He drew her gently toward him. "Or would you prefer that we should be quits thus, and that I should desire no other expiation from you than your death?" She threw her arms around him, clasping him in a closer and closer embrace. There was no need of speech. The happy, blissful throbbing of her heart gave sufficient answer. He kissed her on the forehead. "Now sleep, beloved wife, and rest. Do it for my sake, that I may have a fresh, happy wife." She rose as obediently as a child, but it was hard for her, and she nodded longingly from the door as if a boundless, hopeless distance already divided them. "Ludwig," said Freya, gazing after her in delight, "Ludwig, is this love?" "Yes, by heaven," replied his friend, deeply moved. "Happy man, I would bear all your sorrows for 1 hour like this. Have you now forgiven what she did to me?" "Yes, from my very soul, Magdalena," cried Freya. "Come in again, you must know it before you sleep. Ludwig is reconciled to you." "Ludwig," said the Countess, "my strict noble friend, I thank you." Leading him to the invalid, she placed their hands together. "Now we are again united, and everything is just as it was 10 years ago. Only I have become a different person, and a new and higher life is beginning for me." She pressed a kiss upon the brow of her husband and friend, as if to seal a vow, then left them alone. "Oh, Ludwig, if I could see you so happy." "Do not be troubled. Whoever has experienced this hour with you needs nothing for himself," he answered, an expression of the loftiest, most unselfish joy on his pallid face. The Countess, before retiring, sent for Martin, who was still in Oberammergau, awaiting her orders, and went out into the garden that Freya might not hear them talking in the next room. "Martin," she said with quiet dignity, though there was a slight tremor in her voice, "it is time for me to give some thought to worldly matters. During the last few days I could do nothing but devote myself to the sick bed. Drive home, my good Martin, and give the carriage and horses to the Wildnaus. Tell them what has happened, if they do not yet know it. I cannot write now. Meanwhile, you faithful old servant, tell them to take all I have, my jewels, my palace, my whole private fortune. Only I should like, for the sake of my sick husband, to have them leave me for humanity's sake enough to get him what he needs for his recovery." Here her voice failed. "Countess? Oh, don't call me that." "Yes, for the Countess will always be what she is, even as Herr Freya's wife. I only wanted to say, Your Highness, that I wouldn't do that. If I were you, I wouldn't give them a single kind word. I'll take back the carriage and horses and say that they can have everything which belongs to you. But I won't beg for my Countess. I think it would be less disgrace if you should condescend to accept something from a plain man like myself, who would consider it an honour and whom you needn't thank. He laughed awkwardly. "I only want to say, if you won't take offence, that I bargained for a little house today. But I did it in your name, so that your Highness needn't be ashamed to live with me. I haven't any kith and kin, and it will belong to you." "Martin, Martin!" The proud woman humbly bent her head. "Be it so. You shall help me if all else abandons me. I will accept it as a loan from you. I can paint. I will try to earn something, perhaps from one of the fashion journals, to which I have always subscribed. The maid once told me I might earn my living by it. It was a prophecy, so I can, God willing, repay you at some future day." "Oh, we won't talk about that," cried Martin joyously, kissing the Countess' hands. "If I may have a little room under the roof for myself, we'll call it the interest, and I have something to spare besides, for you must eat too." The Countess covered her face with her trembling hands. "Now I'll drive home. and in your Highness' name throw carriage, horses, and all the rest of the rubbish at the Wildnauser's feet. Then I'll come back and bring something nice for our invalid, which can't be had here, and my livery for Sundays and holidays so that we can make a good appearance, and I'll look after the garden and house, and do whatever else you need. Oh, I've never been so happy in my life." He left her, and the Countess stood gazing after him a long time, deeply shamed by the simple fidelity of the old man, who wished to wear her livery and be her servant, while he was really her benefactor, in truth, high or low. Human nature is common to all. Martin returned. "Doesn't your Highness wish to bid farewell to the horses? Shan't I drive past, or will it make you feel too badly?" "Beautiful creatures." A tone of melancholy echoed in her voice as she spoke. "No, Martin, I don't want to see them again." "Yes, yes." Martin had understood her, and pitied her more than for anything else, for it seemed to him the hardest of sacrifices to part with such beautiful horses. The Countess remained alone in the little garden. The stars were shining above her head. She thought of the diamond stars which she had once flung to Freya in false atonement, to place in the dead child's coffin. If she had them now to use their value to support her sick husband, that would be the fitting atonement. "Only do not let him starve, oh God! If I were forced to see him starve, oh God! Spare me that if it can be," she prayed, her eyes uplifted with anxious care to the glittering star-strewn vault. "How is he?" A woman's figure suddenly emerged from the shadow at her side. "Oh, Mary, Anastasia, how is he?" "Better, I think. He was very cheerful this evening. And you, Frau Freya, how is it with you? It is hard, is it not? There are things to which we must become accustomed." "Yes, I can understand. But do not lose confidence. God is always with us, and I will pray to the Virgin Mary, whom I have so often personated. But if there is need of anything where human power can aid, I may help, may I not? Mary, angel, be my teacher, sister." "No, mother," said Anastasia, smiling, "for if Freya is my son, you must be my daughter." "Oh, you two poor hearts, I am, and shall now remain your mother, Mary. Mother Mary," the Countess repeated, and the two women held each other in a loving embrace. The week was drawing to a close, and the burgomaster was now obliged to consider the question of the distribution of parts. He found the patient out of bed and wearing a very cheerful, hopeful expression. "I don't know, Herr Freya, whether I can venture to discuss my important business with you," he began timidly. "Oh, I understand. You wish to know when I can play again, next Sunday?" "You are not in earnest?" said the burgomaster, almost startled. "Not in earnest? Herr Burgomaster, what would be the value of all my oaths if I should now retreat like a coward? Do you think I would break my word to you a second time, so long as I had breath in my body?" "Certainly not, so long as it is in your power to hold out. But this time you cannot. Ask the doctor. He will not allow it so soon." "Am I to ask him when the question concerns the most sacred duty?" "I will consult him about my life, but my duties are more than my life. Only thus can I atone for the old sin which 10 years ago made me a renegade. And you say this now, when you are so happy." "Herr Burgomaster," replied Freya with lofty serenity, "a man who has once been so happy and so miserable as I, learns to view life from a different standpoint. No joy enraptures, no misfortune terrifies him. Everything to which we give these names is fluctuating, and only one happiness is certain, to do one's duty. Until death." "Herr Freya." "That is a noble thought, but if your wife should hear it, would she agree? Surely, for she thinks as I do. If she did not, we should never have been united. She would never have cast aside wealth, rank, power, and all worldly advantages to live with me in exile. Do you believe she did so for any earthly cause?" "She thinks so, but I know better the cross allured her, as it does all who come in contact with it." "What are you saying about the cross?" asked the Countess, entering the room. "Good morning, friend Burgomaster." "My wife, he will not believe that you would permit me to play the Christus again, even should it cost my life." The Countess turned pale with terror. "Oh, heaven! Are you thinking of doing so?" "Yes," replied the Burgomaster. "He will not be dissuaded from it." "Joseph," said the Countess mournfully, "will you inflict this grief upon me, now when you have scarcely recovered? I assure you that I have played the Christus when I felt far worse than I do now, thanks to your self-sacrificing care, dear wife." Tears filled the Countess' eyes, and she remained silent. "My dove, do we not understand each other?" "Yes," she said after a long, silent struggle. Do it, my beloved husband. Give yourself to God, as I resign you to him. He has only loaned you to me. I dare not keep you from him, if he desires to show himself again to the world in your form. I will cherish and tend and watch over you, that you may endure it. And when you are taken down from the cross, I will rub your strained limbs, and bedew your burning brow with the tears of all the sorrows Mary and Magdalene suffered for the crucified one. And, when you have rested, and again raise your eyes to mine with a smile, I will rest your head upon my breast in the blissful feeling that you are no god who will ascend to heaven, but a man, a tender, beloved man, and my own. Oh, God cannot destroy such happiness, and if he does, he will only draw you to himself, that I may therefore long the more fervently for you, for him, who is the source of all love. Then, her voice was stifled by tears as she laid her head on his breast, then your wife will not murmur, but wait silently and patiently till she can follow you. Leaning on his breast, she wept softly, clasping him in her arms that he might not be torn from her. Dear wife, he answered gently, and the wonderfully musical voice trembled with the most sacred emotion. We will accept whatever God sends, loyal to the cross. You and I, beloved, high-hearted woman, do not weep, my dove. Being loyal to the cross does not mean only to be patient, it means also to be strong. Does not the soldier go bravely to death for an earthly king, and should not I joyfully peril my life for my God? Yes, my husband, you are right, I will be strong. Go then, holy warrior, into the battle for the ideal, and put yourself at the disposal of your brave fellow combatants. She slowly withdrew her arms from his neck, as if taking a long, reluctant farewell. The burgomaster resolutely approached. We people of Ammergau must bow to this sacred zeal. This is indeed a grandeur which conquers death. Whoever sees this effect of our modest play on souls like yours cannot be mistaken in believing that the power which works such miracles does not emanate from men, and must proceed from a god. But as he is a god of love, he will not accept your sacrifice. Freya must not take the part which might cost him his life. We will find a Christus elsewhere, and thus manage for this time. Freya fixed his eyes mournfully on the ground. Now the crown has indeed fallen from my head. God has no longer accepted me. I am shut out from the sacred work. The burgomaster placed his wife in his arms. Let it be your task now to guard this soul and lead it to its destination. This too is a sacred work. Yes, and amen, said Freya. The ex-countess and the former Christus, both divested of their temporary dignity, verified his words, attaining in humility true dignity. Freya rallied under the care of his beloved wife, and they used the respite allotted to them by leading a life filled with labour, sacrifice, and gratitude toward God. You ask me, dear friend, the Countess wrote a year later to the Duke of Barnheim, whether you can assist me in any way. I thank you for the loyal friendship, but must decline the noble offer. Contentment does not depend upon what we have, but what we need, and I have that, for my wants are few. This is because I have obtained blessings, which formerly I never possessed, and which render me independent of everything else. Much as God has taken from me. He has bestowed in exchange 3 precious gifts: contempt for the vanities of the world, appreciation of the little pleasures of life, and recognition of the real worth of human beings. I am not even so poor as you imagine. My faithful old Martin, who will never leave me, helped me out of the first necessity. Afterwards, the Wildenhouses were induced to give up my private property, jewels, dresses, and works of art, and their value proved sufficient to pay Martin for the little house he had purchased for me, and to establish for my husband a small shop for the sale of wood carving, so that he need not be dependent upon others. When he works industriously, which he is only too anxious to do at the cost of his delicate health, we can live without anxiety, though, of course, very simply. I know how many of my former acquaintances would shudder at the thought of such a prosaic existence. To them, I would say that I have learned not to seek poetry in life, but to place it there. Yes, tell the mocking world that Countess Wildenau lives by her husband's labour and is not ashamed of it. My friend, to throw away a fortune for love of a woman is nothing, but to toil year in and year out, with tireless fidelity and sacrifice, to earn a wife's daily bread in the sweat of one's brow is something. Do you know what it is to a woman to owe her life daily to her beloved husband? An indescribable happiness. You, my friend, would have bestowed a principality upon me, and I should have accepted it as my rightful tribute, without owing you any special gratitude. But the hand which toils for me I kiss every evening with a thrill of grateful reverence. So do not grieve for me. Wed the lovable and charming Princess Amalie of whom you wrote, and should you ever come with your young wife into the vicinity of the little house surrounded by rustling firs under the shadow of the Korfel, I should be cordially glad to welcome you. Farewell. May you be as happy, my noble friend, as you deserve, and leave to me my poverty and my wealth. You see that the phantom has become reality. The ideal is attained. Your old friend, Magdalena Freya. When the Duke received this letter, his valet saw him, for the first time in his life, weep bitterly. Conclusion. FROM illusion, TO truth. For 10 years God granted the loving wife her husband's life. It seemed as if he had entirely recovered. At last the day came when he required it again. For the third time the community offered Freya the part of the Christus. He was still a handsome man, and spite of his 48 years, as slender as a youth, while his spiritual expression, chaste and lofty, rendered him more than ever an ideal representative of Christ. God bestowed upon him the full cup of the perfection of his destiny, and it was completed as he had longed. Not on a sickbed succumbing to lingering disease, but high on the cross, as victor over pain and death. God had granted him the grace of at last completing the task. He had held out this time until the final performance. Then, when they took him down from the cross for the last time under the falling leaves, amid the first snow of the late autumn, he did not wake again. On the cross the noble heart had ceased to beat. He had entered into the peace of him whom he personated, passed from illusion to truth, from the copy to the prototype. Never did mortal die a happier death, never did a more beautiful smile of contentment rest upon the face of a corpse. It is finished. You have done in your way what your model did in his. You have sealed the sacred lesson of love by your death, my husband, said the pallid woman, who pressed the last kiss upon his lips. The semblance had become reality, and Mary Magdalene was weeping beside her Redeemer's corpse. On the third day after the crucifixion, when the true Christ had risen, Freya was borne to his grave. But, like the phalanx from its ashes, on that day the real Christ rose from the humble sepulchre for the penitent. "When wilt thou appear to me in the spring garden, redeeming love?" she had once asked. Now she was, in the autumn garden, beside the grave of all happiness. When the coffin had been lowered, and the pall-bearers approached the worn, drooping widow, the burgomaster asked, "Where do you intend to live now, madame?" "Where, except in Ammergau, here, where his foot has marked for me the path to God." "Oh, my Gethsemane!" "But," said the pastor, "will you exile yourself forever in this quiet village? Do you not wish to return to your own circle and the world of culture? You have surely atoned sufficiently." "Atoned? No, your reverence, not atoned, for the highest happiness is no atonement. Expiation is beginning now." She turned toward the Christ which hung on the wall of the church, not far from the grave, and extending her arms toward it, murmured, "Now I have nothing save thee. Thou hast conquered. Idea of Christianity, thy power is eternal." The cloud of tears hung heavily over Ammergau, falling from time to time in damp showers. Evening had closed in. Through the lighted windows of the ground floor of a little house, surrounded by rustling pines, 2 women were visible, Mary and Magdalena. The latter was kneeling before the mother, whose clasped hands were laid upon her head in comfort and benediction. The lamps in the low-roofed houses of the village were gradually lighted. The peasants again sat in their ragged blouses on the carvers' benches, toiling, sacrificing, and bearing their lot of poverty and humility, proud in the consciousness that every 10 years there will be a return of the moment which strips off the yoke and lays the purple on their shoulders. The moment when in their midst the miracle is again performed which spreads victoriously throughout a penitent world. The moment which brings to weary, despairing humanity peace and atonement on the cross.